Well, surprise, surprise, look what we've got here. My old 82 Fleetwood Brougham Cadillac. So most of you know this is the car that kind of made me famous. I built this in my garage around 1995. Actually, I bought the car in 91, I guess, late 91 in El Paso, Texas. Drove it back from there, went into storage for a little while. I started working on it slowly. You know, 2 young kids, a mortgage, all that kind of stuff. So I had to build it over a slow period of time. But anyway, I finished it around 1995 as far as the mechanical part of everything and the paint job. And then in 96, I did the interior after I crashed my motorcycle at Brainerd, Minnesota, and I was kind of disabled for a little while, and I was able to get some of the work done on the interior of the car. So we're gonna go around here and I'll kind of show you the overall condition. It's been gone from my life for over 16 years and it's been a bit neglected. Unfortunately, it was found sitting in a driveway under pine trees with 4 flat tires in New Jersey, and things have deteriorated quite a bit. So I'll walk around the car and show you some of the things that are in disrepair, and then we'll talk about some of the mods that I did way back in the day before any suspension components aftermarket were made for these B-body General Motors cars. So starting off, you can probably see this red trim here. This body molding was powder coated red. It appears that the guy that powder coated it for me didn't scuff it when it was powder coated, because they're shiny underneath, and obviously from deteriorating in the sun it started peeling. Another thing about this car is it says here Fleetwood, it says Brougham d'Elegance, and then on the kick panel it says Fleetwood Brougham, but basically Fleetwood was a body manufacturer that manufactured bodies for Cadillac way back in the day, kind of like Pininfarina is with Ferraris, or had been with Ferraris. So Fleetwood was like a body manufacturer and design firm. So this is a Fleetwood Brougham d'Elegance, not a Coupe de Ville. The weird thing is it's a 2-door, and most of those cars were 4 doors. However, there was a relatively small amount that were made in the 2-door sedan. So this is a 2-door Fleetwood Brougham d'Elegance, not a Coupe de Ville, like most people think. So anyway, that's that. The wheels are still on the car that was on there when I sold it. I had 2 sets of wheels on this car, centerline billet GNs, and then these centerline forged billets later on. We narrowed the frame, which I'll show you in a little bit, to fit the 315 wide tire in the back. Originally it had 275s on both ends with the billet GN wheels. So the paint is deteriorated a bit, probably from the pine trees and the acid and things like that. There's mold on the wheels, believe it or not, and there's mold inside the car, mold and mildew. So we're going to do an ozone generator in there today for a little while and try to kill all that, and then we'll see if we can shampoo it and get it back. Otherwise, it's probably going to need to get redone. For sure, I'm going to throw a new carpet in it. Back here, these are called the taillight extensions, and these pieces were made out of urethane, and when they got exposed to UV rays and light, they just crumbled, and obviously these have crumbled. On the end here, you can actually see the edge of my bumper. This center section of the front and rear bumpers I fabricated out of 60 thousandths aluminum, and back there you can see the shock absorbers are no longer there, and there's just fabricated plates with a piece of tubing to hold the bumper on the car. I took over 100 and some pounds off the rear of the car and about 200 pounds off the front of the car. On these taillight extensions, there are reproduction pieces made to repair this. This is a fiberglass one. I'm told that this one has no seams and it's very smooth. It requires a minimum amount of body work to make that actually fit on there and look nice. There's other ones that are plastic, but they have a seam in them with an edge that needs to be finished. And I'm told that there's a little bit of waviness to them, and they're not quite as good as these fiberglass ones. These apparently hold their shape longer. They don't warp from the heat and so forth. So those will get painted and put on there in the near future. and then we'll try buffing the paint out and see what we can do. This car was originally painted back in around 1994 by Matt in Lake Barrington, and he did this graphic on the back that says Cadillac Attack. Kind of a cool touch, I always thought. The vinyl top had been replaced by Danny's in Wakanda, I believe, and it's actually shrunk up from sitting outside, so the holes that were punched in the vinyl to clear the pins for the trim of the side trim have actually become exposed a little bit, the two notches here from the vinyl shrinking up there, so that's unfortunate. Hot Rod Power Tour, did a bunch of those with this car, got a bunch of tickets, was on Hot Rod TV a bunch of times, had a lot of fun on Hot Rod Power Tour. Sticker's still in place. There's only been 900 miles put on this car since I sold it 16 years ago. Pretty amazing. The interior was a custom job that I had done. I had Cadillac logos embroidered into the seats, black leather inserts with cloth outer areas. The front seats are Recaro seats, genuine Recaro seats. A Trans Am GTA steering wheel with the Cadillac logo there. Autometer gauges, which I may change out to some Stuart Warners that I have in the near future. The lower dash pad is cracked on the top there, so that's unfortunate. And there's lots of mold and mildew in there. You don't really want to, I probably should be wearing a mask, but like I said, I'll put the ozone generator in there and see what that does. The paint has a lot of oxidation on it. We tried cleaning it a little bit here with some wax. I'm not really sure what's going to happen there, but I don't really want to have to repaint the car. So we'll try buffing it and see if we can bring it back. Underneath the hood, all this bracing was powder coated. It's showing some signs of deterioration and some rust. The core support is rotted out here on both sides from the moisture being outside. This car was a diesel car and it had 2 batteries at one point, and I believe some acid may have gotten between the 2 layers of metal here and rotted that out after being exposed to the moisture. But this was all, cleaned and painted when I did the car. All the original pieces are here. Like I said, only 900 miles on the car since it left me. The hood's in pretty good shape on the bottom side, no signs of rust or things like that. I did put a vintage air system on it right before I sold it for the buyer of the car. That's still in place. All this bracing inside the engine bay here with standard equipment on the high-end Cadillacs to make the ride more smooth. It was engineered for a smooth ride, but they wanted everything flex-free. So it basically stiffens the front of the car so that there's no flex and squeaks and rattles and things like that. But it made a big difference on solidifying the car. The lesser cars like the Impalas, Caprices, and Oldsmobiles and such did not have this extensive bracing. A lot of people thought I added that, but that was all factory Cadillac pieces. And many of these old Cadillacs, that stuff got thrown away by the mechanic that was working on the car because you had to remove it to get to some of the components. But this is all factory bracing that was powder coated red, and it's still in place there, so happy to see that. This car had 2 engines in it during my ownership. The 455 Olds, it is a diesel car, so the Olds 455 bolted right in where the 350 Olds diesel was. Same motor mounts and everything. And then when that dropped a valve and broke a valve spring, I guess, on Hot Rod Power Tour, it's kind of ironic. I was going on Hot Rod Power Tour and that Olds engine had been in there for a few years, and one of the maintenance things that engine builders will tell you is you got to put new valve springs on things after a period of time. So it had a solid roller cam in it, and I figured, well, I'm going on this long trip to San Bernardino, California on Power Tour. I'd need to put some new valve springs in it. So I put some fresh valve springs in it, and ironically, in Arizona, the new valve springs I put on, one of them broke, dropping a valve, and punching a hole in the piston and in the head and all kinds of stuff. So it was kind of strange. I think I probably should have left it alone. But anyway, 73 Eldorado 500 made its way in here, and I did a mild rebuild on it with a mild cam that Comp Cams had, and then I did some extensive porting on the cylinder heads on it. I also took a big block Chevy header set and welded them to a custom set of Cadillac flanges. So that's how I got the nice long tube headers on there. I also did a steering shaft here. I got rid of the rag joints, put a pair of aluminum universal joints, which you'll see in a second, and an aluminum steering shaft in there. It's got a cool can, MSD retard control. It does have nitrous oxide, MSD ignition, and custom engraved air cleaner and valve covers that we did many years ago. In the rear of this car, we narrowed the frame, as I mentioned, to fit the wider tires. In the front, there was no components available back in the day, so I found out that a Trans Am sway bar was the same width. So it has a Trans Am WS6 sway bar from like 70 something to 81, so it's 1 5/16 inches, I believe it is, or 1.25 inches. And then I've got KYB shocks. I cut the springs in the front 1 coil, the rear is stock. The brakes on this car are 12-inch brakes, the largest that GM put on any of these cars, so I just left them on there back in the day, painted the calipers red. Incidentally, one of those is stuck and the pads were deteriorated, so we're putting new calipers and pads all the way around just as a precaution. Anxious to take it out for a ride. In the rear, I put 12-inch front discs from a Corvette, so those are like I think around 92 to 94 Corvette front rotors. They have an integral hat and they just slipped over the studs, and then I made a bracket to use a G-body caliper. The rear end in this car is from a Olds Cutlass, a 73 to 77. They bolt into the B-body cars, all the mid-size 73 to 77 rear ends. Oldsmobile rear ends, incidentally, do not have C-clips, so it has a retainer plate that holds the axles in. So it's actually a much better setup than the Chevrolet rear end. Also, it has much beefier axles in the Olds rear end. So that's been in there since I built the car and has held up greatly. This car would do 11-second pass with normal street tires, 11.8, 11.9 at around 118 miles an hour. So we'll plan on trying that out. The rear control arms were boxed, the factory ones that were boxed, and then I made bushings for those and the front control arms, upper and lowers. The fronts were made out of Delrin with steel liners and grease fittings, and the rear were boxed, and then a sway bar was added there. So that's a short synopsis of all the stuff that we did on this car, and then I'll show you how we notched the rear frame here. The wheel wells on these Cadillacs and most of the GMB bodies are quite large, and I was able to fit a 315 on an 11-inch wide rim by notching the frame. You can see where I notched in here. I fitted a 1/4-inch plate inside the frame rail and then welded it on the surface. So there's a 1/4-inch plate stiffening that and narrowing it. So that's how I was able to fit it in. So the frame rail is essentially flush with the inner fender, and there's no mini tubbing required to fit a 315 in here. I just had a 335 up in here, kind of test fit, and with a little trimming on the fender lip and massaging of the inner fender, it may be possible to fit a bigger tire in there. But for sure, the 315 fits in there. I'm probably going to end up going with a 305 because I plan on taking this out and autocrossing it for nostalgia's sake, and I don't really want anything to be rubbing. So that's pretty much what we have here, a deteriorated Cadillac that needs a lot of love and attention, and probably a good amount of money as well. But I plan on trying to resurrect it as cheaply as possible because it was built on a budget in the first place. So we're trying to get it back on the road with a minimum amount of financial impact. Hopefully the engine and transmission work properly, but we'll have to test drive them and see. At the present time, I'm putting all new brakes on it more as a precaution. One of them was locked up and not rolling, so we'll do that as a precaution, and then we'll see where we go from here. So stay tuned, and we'll do another video on it once I get it running and driving.